Hey everybody, what is up? It's me, Dan, moderately anonymous MTG. We are here again today to talk about something weird that happened in the cEDH tournament community, and something that I think we should shed a little bit of light on, so let's talk about it. Now, this is an issue that came up over this past weekend, and I think it was the Mox Masters tournament. Someone can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong about that, but basically what we need to know is that this is basically another case of what is commonly referred to as priority bullying. If you've never heard of this term before, priority bullying is something that happens in a multiplayer game of EDH when a player that is further ahead in the turn order, say player 1 or 2, uses some heads-up knowledge to be able to pass priority and allow the people who are lower on the priority poll and maybe positions 3 or 4 to use their resources first before those early players have to. Basically, player 1 or 2 is making it the responsibility of player 3 or 4 to use their counter magic to save the game so that player 1 or 2 can save their own resources. Now, specifically, the scenario came up this weekend is player 1 presents a win con on the stack. Player 2 has some counter magic in their hand that the entire table knows about, and the same is true for player 4. So player 2, whether it is their motivation to go for their own win con on their own turn, maybe they only have a single piece of counter magic to be able to back it up, or if they just want to get player 4 to use their resources first, for whatever reason it is, player 2 passes priority because they know, air quotes, know, that for the sheer fact of not wanting to throw this game, especially in a tournament setting, that player 4 is going to have to use their resources. Player 3 sees what's happening, probably also suspects the same thing, passes priority to player 4. Player 4, however, says, I'm not going to get priority bullied here. I'm passing priority. I know that we both have counter magic in our hand and neither one of us wanted to use it, but you're not going to make me use mine, so we are losing this game. And that's exactly what happened. Player 4 passed priority, player 1's win con resolves off of the stack, and the game is over. Now, obviously, this left a pretty bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, and I think a big part of that is the fact that this sort of comes off like player 2 is extorting player 4 here, but if you think about it, both players are playing the same angle against one another. This isn't politicking that's happening at the table here, this is a game of chicken. Both of these players are looking at each other, they both have equal resources, and they are both saying to the other one, I'm not going to use mine. Both players take that step towards the brink, and both players take the step over the edge, and that's what they chose to do in this situation. And honestly, it just comes down to this is really bad politicking. For what it's worth, I'm not here to say that player 2 or player 4 is wrong in this scenario. I think that they both have valid points for doing what they did, and I don't necessarily disagree or agree with either one of them, but I do want to point out the fact that what they were doing was clearly ineffective. So unfortunately, like we said before, this is just sort of the way that things work in a multiplayer setting of Magic. All 4 players have to get priority, that's just how the rules work. Rule 117.3c says, if a player has priority when they cast a spell, activate an ability, or take a special action, that player receives priority afterwards. So what this basically means that if a player does something when there's something on the stack, they're going to get priority after that. If they don't do that, then priority is going to move to the next person, and all of those same questions are going to get asked of that player. Now, importantly, part of this was the phrase special actions, which also means tapping your mana. This is something that I learned a lot later than I should have, but a very heads up play that you can make in a scenario like this, if you are going to go for this sort of like playing chicken move, is you can pass priority as player 2, and if it gets to player 4 and they say, I'm not going to do anything about it, you can request for player 4 to tap any piece of mana, and that's going to reset priority on the stack, go back to player 2 for them to have an opportunity to do this again. And while again, I can understand this seems like a little bit of an underhanded kind of a play, this is all well within the rules, and these are all plays that you can be making in the game of Magic. There's nothing illegal about any of them. But I think most importantly, the kind of special action that you want to be taking here is not making your opponent tap mana to get priority to go back around. It's using your words and talking about how you want this game to play out. Like I said before, I'm not here to talk about whether these actions were right or wrong, but I am here to critique them and say that there's a much better way that you can go about this. Let's talk about the possible player 2 motivations again. Player 2 sees player 1 going for it, and they are ready to go for it themselves. Maybe player 1 has the fastest oracle in the console, player 2 also has that oracle in console, and they've only got one piece of counter magic in hand. Maybe it's just a Flusterstorm. And again, this Flusterstorm is heads up to the table, everybody knows about it. And again, the idea that player 2 has in their mind is, for the integrity of this game and us all not wanting to lose, it is going to make sense for player 4 to spend their interaction when they're at the bottom of priority. If you want to win in a tournament setting, the first thing you got to do is not lose to other players attempting to win first. Now in player 4's position, they might be reading this table correctly, saying, I see player 1 going for a win. If player 2 is going to pass it up to me, I bet that they've got a win in hand. If I spend my Flusterstorm here, we're going to go to player 2's turn, they're going to play out their Thoracle and Consult and have counter backup for that, and they are just going to win the game because I was last in turn order. And I totally get that that feels really bad for player 4 in that position. You are, as they say, just stuck between a rock and a hard place. If you don't use your counter magic, you lose. If you do use your counter magic, you lose. Basically, you're just making the decision, do I want to lose now or 5 minutes from now? I think in the situation that actually happened, priority gets to me, I'm player 4, I'm looking at player 2 with their heads up counter magic in hand, and I'm just going to say it straight up like I'm seeing it. I can see the counter magic in your hand. I see that you're passing priority to me. I think that you are going to try to win if I spend my counter, and that might be correct and that might not be correct. But importantly, you need to make that claim. You need to say what you see on the table and also try to make the deal. And this might sound sort of antithetical to the cEDH experience, but again, if you're trying every effort to win this game, you got to use your words in this scenario. So I would say what I see there, and then also say to player 2, if I spend this counter magic here, you need to promise to me that you are not going to make a win attempt on your next turn. And again here, priority is literally on player 4 like it was in this real life scenario. But now, without using the stack at all, we've put priority back on player 2. We're having a conversation. This is a special action, but this is not a special action that uses the stack or resets priority. We're putting the responsibility of this game back into player 2's lap, where we as player 4 would justifiably like it to be. And we can allow them to go either way with it. They can either say, no, I'm not going to agree to that. You either have to spend this counter magic or choose to lose. In which case, you as player 4 have already stated your scenario. I'm not going to use it unless you promise me this. And now as player 2, you have to make that decision again. Am I going to ensure mutual destruction and say no, that I won't make that promise? Or are you going to politic correctly and try to keep yourself in this game and say, yes, if you use your counter magic, I will not attempt to win on my next turn. And then I'll still have this piece of counter magic and we can all sort of try to keep the table in check until it gets out of control again. This is the kind of politicking that I don't often see at cEDH tables, but I do see at the very highest level of cEDH tables. When I play with the people who I am personally the most scared of playing against, these are the kinds of conversations that we're having at the table. While it's certainly within anyone's rights to just play this game of chicken and say that I'm not going to use my counter magic, I'm going to win on my turn no matter what, and I'm going to pass it to you and let you decide whether or not we lose, I don't know why you would be inclined to do that personally. There are already so many instances in a game of cEDH where you can lose to your opponent's decisions. Why give your opponents any more opportunities to make decisions for you to lose would be my thought, especially if you can get through this just with the act of talking. Again, I see that this doesn't happen super often, but I think it should be happening a lot more. cEDH is an extremely hard way to play Magic. Like I said, there are so many opportunities for your opponents to make decisions about whether or not you lose the game. So don't give them any more opportunities than they need to have. If you can use your words and politic your way through losing a game, absolutely take that route. I think what happened here is that player 2 made a decision about this game and thought that player 4 was going to act rationally. And if you're playing against a bunch of computers, depending on someone to act rationally in their position is probably a good bet, but you know what? You're playing against humans, and humans have emotions, humans have reactions to things. I'm not going to say that this player acted rationally, but this player did act emotionally. Player 4 looks at player 2 and says, if that's the way you want to play this game, I'm not into it. I'm not going to use this just to let you have the points in this competition. Player 1 gets it. And you know what? Both players are equally within their rights to make those actions. But I think this is very far from the only way that this situation could have turned out. There are so many different ways we could have tackled this situation to get to a different outcome in this game. And I think that's something that people need to think about a lot more in their games. There is a lot more agency that we have over the game of Magic that can be manipulated outside of the act of priority passing, and I think it's something that we need to utilize a lot more in our games if we want to have better games. Well, anyway, that's all I have to say about this. Again, I'm not here to make moral judgments on anybody's plays, but I do think that there's a bigger and more interesting picture that we can think about in the way that we play the game of cEDH. Well, thanks so much. I hope that y'all enjoyed watching. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe. It's all super helpful, and we will catch you next time. Be good to yourself, everybody.